First, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you find some valuable information from Mike's story. I am Dan Bink, and I run the Advanced Iowa program here at UNI. We're excited to have you joining us, and we're excited to have Mike join us as well. He's going to share a little bit of his story. I'm kind of going from starting a business out of his garage to completing the sale of it here within the last year or so. And so everything is still kind of fresh in his mind, and it'll be great to kind of hear his perspective on how things have gone, how things went for him through the whole process. So let's get started here. Mike, do you want to kind of share a little bit on your background and how you got started into starting a business?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. As Dan said, my name is Mike Strajack. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I got to college in '85, and like a lot of folks back then, the farm economy was at the bottom of the barrel. And so I went to Texas and started with a company called Wallace Computer Services, which is a Fortune 1000 business form printer, now part of the R.R. Donnelley companies. After spending 2 years in Austin, I ended up getting the opportunity to run the Eastern Iowa sales office. And it was at that time that I met my future business partner, Randy McDonald. We worked together about 7 years and started discussing going out on our own, starting our own company. So after a lot of research, several road trips, we found an opportunity at the old Amana refrigeration plant in Amana, Iowa. At the time, Amana was in the early stages of lean manufacturing. They had just hired their first corporate cost control manager, and we started talking with him about various opportunities. And one opportunity kept coming to light, and that was the literature assembly program. A literature assembly is the plastic bag full of information you get when you buy an appliance. At the time, they had individuals standing on each assembly line, gathering the product, stuffing it into a plastic bag, and then putting it in the crisper door of the refrigerator. We worked with them to design a program where we would manage all different printers, assemble the final product, deliver it to them in a completed bag into returnable containers, all on a consignment basis. After presenting this idea, they accepted it, and in July of '95, we began the business as Network Imaging Solutions, or just shortened to NIS. And we managed all of this product, delivered to the point of use every Thursday in returnable containers, returned any product back to our warehouses, which was our garages at the time. And then we did this every Thursday for probably the first 6 years we were in business. This gave us the opportunity to meet with everybody in the factory, from the receiving people all the way to the people on the lines to the office people. So we learned a lot about Amana, what their needs were. This allowed us to expand the business into our first non-print assembly was a aftermarket ice maker. And then as Amana went through several buyouts, first to the Goodman Corporation, then to Maytag, and finally to Whirlpool, they continued to increase their outsourcing. And what we did was a lot of the production assemblies. This would be things such as the light assemblies that turn on when you open the door, basket assemblies, fan assemblies, etc. And when we, at the end, every refrigerator you buy at that plant had approximately 10 of our assemblies in it. And in addition to Whirlpool, we also expanded the business into the education and the healthcare markets. And when we sold the company at the end of 2015, we employed close to 200 people. We had 2 locations, Davenport and North Liberty, Iowa, occupying about 165,000 square feet of production space.
So let me stop you there, Mike. So I know that the major point of our or focus of our time today is about your exit planning, but curious how you moved from kind of print guys into deciding, yeah, we can do assembly. Was it just, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can you kind of walk us through how you and Randy decided, yeah, we could do this and let's give it a whirl?
Well, the folks at Amana saw the printed material as an assembly. It contained 5 to 6 pieces of materials put in a plastic bag. Their aftermarket ice makers, they saw as an assembly. It was very similar in their minds, in that you were taking various components and instead of assembling into a bag, you, for the most part, screwed or stacked the pieces together and then put them in a box. So just a different medium, but in the end, it was the same product.
All right. So you didn't really consider yourself a manufacturer at that point, or
No, we saw ourselves as print guys. My business partner was a true salesperson that was willing to take on any opportunity. I used to always joke that my job was to somehow turn his lies into truths as the behind the scene guy. And he spent a couple of days at the factory, said this ice maker thing is not difficult. He was confident he could figure it out with his previous work experience prior to Wallace.
okay. Maybe let's dive into this partnership concept then. So some of our listeners and so many of our clients are in partnerships. How did you go about forming that, and then how did you kind of keep yourselves accountable to reviewing that, updating it, managing the organization, I guess, from that ownership standpoint?
Well, it's interesting because my partner and I are probably 180 degrees apart in a lot of facets of life. I was very numbers oriented, detail oriented. He in turn was a delegator, didn't like to get into the details, was a big picture kind of a guy. He also was a delegator. So two completely opposite people. We both, we did nothing socially together, but I don't want anybody to misconstrue that. We're as close as brothers. And it actually, having two people that had worked together for 8 years, knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses, it worked out well for us because I didn't need another me to run this business. I needed somebody that had strengths that were my weaknesses and vice versa. So when we started talking about a business, we immediately contacted a friend of his that just happened to be a CPA of a mid-sized accounting firm here in the Quad Cities. And he helped us to set up the company. And I think, if I remember correctly, we started out as a C Corp. And due to tax law changes, we finalized. And when we sold, we were an S Corp. So I hope that answers your question. Dan, I'm not getting any volume from you.
Sorry about that. Did you have a buy-sell agreement in place or anything that kind of, help manage the relationship from a legal standpoint between you and your business partner? And I'm assuming you had something. Just curious how you managed that.
We did, and I hope we were more of the rule versus the exception, but probably within the first 12 to 18 months, we worked with our CPA and attorney to draft a buy-sell agreement. The buy-sell agreement was very simple. It stated that if either one of us died, the other had to buy out the assets which was funded through a term life insurance policy. That we thought at the time, it was a $500,000 policy, was more than enough to take care of our spouse and pay them, I should say, pay our spouse fairly for the amount of the business. And like a lot of business owners, that document sat in the drawer for 15 years. Didn't look at it, didn't talk about it. I shouldn't say we didn't talk about it. We discussed it, but we just would always put it on the back burner. We had a business to run. There was always going to be some time to talk about this buy-sell agreement. And so it was always in the back of our minds, but we never did anything with it, not until 2011.
Okay. So you had something, but until you needed it, you didn't really do a lot with it, type of thing, right?
Well, I wouldn't say we even needed it. It just, we had a crisis, which I know we're limited to an hour here today. In 2011, it really woke us up and got us serious about succession planning. And we made a decision after that we needed to get our act together and really start talking about this. At the time, my partner was 57. I was 50. We had started the business 16 years prior. And all of a sudden, our mind tells us we're still 20, but you look in the mirror and we're at our parents' age already.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that succession planning process then. You want to start in on that?
Yep. It took us almost 4 years. And I start out with that point because we were fortunate. We got the wake-up call before it was too late. For a lot of owners, the succession plan, it's never implemented, or it's hastily implemented, and then it's too late, and all the work you put into the business, the value you built, you may not realize that value because you haven't done the proper succession plan. So we really took a hard look. Once we got through our crisis of 11, in early 12 is when we started the succession planning. And we sold the business at the end of 15. So it literally did take us 4 years to accomplish that. And I'll stop here before I get into kind of what we did, the process we followed, in case there's any questions up to this point before we talk about the process itself.
Sure. And I'll say too that if you have questions as we go along, please just put those in the chat box and we can take them as we go. So let's keep going, Mike. If we get some, we can address them as we go. But so it's kind of a 4-year process on a succession plan. Is that, did you think, boy, how did it ever take that long when you look in the rearview mirror, or was that pretty, did that feel about right, I guess?
Well, in our case, and I'll talk about this here in a minute, we would have liked to have gotten it accomplished in 12 to 18 months, but it wasn't realistic. We went through what I would call a 5-step process. We first had to sit down, identify what our objectives were as owners of the business. What
do you mean by that?
Well, what did we want as both professionally and personally? Did we want to be absentee owners? Did we want to completely sell? Just ask yourself all the questions as you would with any project. Well, what are the goals?
So did you feel like you guys were able to be on the same page with that and had aligning goals? Did you know that you would beforehand, or was it serendipity that you did at this point? Or
we talked a lot. Like I said, we had a very tough 2011, as a lot of businesses did. And, with the age difference of 7 years, my partner's like, well, I'm ready to be done. I'm going to be pushing 60. Do you want to buy me out? And to be quite frank, I was getting burned out. And so after much discussion, we thought we came into this together. Let's go out together. So once we had our objectives, personal and professional objectives set, then we had to start sitting down and really quantifying our business and personal financial resources to see if it was even possible to do this. And I'll get into all these as we go through each step. I'm just going to kind of give a quick overview of the 5 steps. And the third thing we talked about was, after these first 2 meetings, was how do we maximize the value of the company to get the most money out of it for ourselves. The 4th step then was, we've got all this data, who are we going to sell it to? So we had to determine who our potential buyers were. And then once all this was done, and this a little bit prior to the sale, but a lot after the sale, was we had to look at our personal wealth and our estate planning, which is, I don't know if that's something that, it's certainly nothing I had thought about prior to getting into this process, but that ended up being a huge part of it. So we can start out with the objectives. I know there's a lot of different things you can look at. For us, we looked at 4 primary objectives. When did we want to get out? As mentioned before, it took us almost 4 years to achieve this. So my comment here was, don't ever underestimate the timeline or how long it's going to take you to exit your business. If you can get out in a year or 2, great, but more than likely it's going to take you longer than you think. Another objective for us was the level of income we wanted or needed. Did we want to live the same lifestyle we were accustomed to living? How much money was it going to take to get ourselves out of to last the rest of our lives? You know, getting out for me at 53, you know, I would need 20 to 30 or 35 years of income. The other thing we had to take a look at was our total compensation package. As business owners, yeah, we get paid, but what are the perks? You know, the car, and you know, the company car, the insurance, the travel and entertainment expenses that you take advantage of as a business owner. I'm hoping we don't have any IRS people on the call, but
yeah, we're sending this in right as you speak. Your cell phone, yep, sure.
It was all legal. You know, and then we looked at, to whom do we want to transfer the business to? Did we want to transfer to our kids, key employee groups? Did we want to, we looked at an ESOP. And then finally we looked at third-party sale, and that's ultimately what we decided to do.
Can you walk us through that in a little bit of detail, Mike, as far as, that's an important step. So we've covered how much do we need, right? How much do we need out of the business? And I'm sure tied to that is kind of some valuation work that you did on what the business is worth. What your objectives were from the standpoint of, what am I going to do next? Now we're talking a little bit about, who are we going to sell to? When you're going down that road, you've got lots of options in a bigger company like yours. How did you whittle that down? You know, family, key employees. Did you approach key employees? Did you want to keep that secret? Did you, you know, how did you do that?
Part of our strategic planning meetings in 2012, we added succession planning, and it was, hey guys, Randy and I are getting older. We got to, not only do we need to think about succession planning, But as an employee, you need to think about succession planning. Who's your replacement? So that was how we approached the employees.
Was that was that tough to do, to kind of not only recognize your own mortalities to some extent, but even your employees more? From how did they take that, you think?
Well, we had a solid management team, so this was a trusted group that we had. They were used to us sharing information, even information you typically don't share in a tightly held business. And not only was it necessarily their mortality, but it was, hey, if you want to get promoted, the easiest way to get promoted is to have your replacement in place. So we tried to tee it up so that it was in a non-threatening manner. In fact, we even talked to the employees about, hey, Randy and I want to take a huge step back from the business, to the point where, is anybody here interested in buying us out? That was one of our strategic planning meetings. Is the group here interested in purchasing us? We had a 12-person management team.
So you just threw it out there.
We threw it out there. And this was like I said, this was a group that we'd had in place from anywhere from 2 to 8 or 10 years. So they were, it was a tight knit group. And we shared everything with them. We felt that was the best way to achieve the level of trust that we wanted with our employees. Now, that being said, when we did announce that we were selling the company, there was a little bit of shock. But I think the fact that we had brought up, 18 to 24 months earlier, that, hey, we talked to you guys and want to know if anybody was interested in buying, and nobody stepped forward, so we went a different path.
No one even, had a cursory informal conversation with you, or?
There was no interest, and I don't know, we could talk about that all day, but no, there was no interest.
Okay, and what about, so that's the key employee route, and what about the, the family route? So you and Randy, I assume, have families. Was that ever contemplated?
We talked about it, and I don't want to get into a lot of details. It just wasn't a good option in terms of, what our business, our customer base made it very difficult to do that.
Okay. So you kind of knocked those two out in some good conversation, and then you're left with really then a third party option, right?
Yeah, because the ESOP that would have been a difficult option for us to do. So we focused on that third party sale. And then a fourth objective, this is really not financial, but it's a very critical part. What do you want to do post-sale? And I say it's a critical part because you can't underestimate this question, as you've spent the last, for us, 20 years eating, breathing, sleeping our corporation. And then we woke up on January 1st, 2016. We don't have anything to do. So you got to think about what you're going to do post-sale. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I'm going to say you and your spouse will have completely different opinions on what you're going to do post-sale.
Okay. So we've got those objectives laid out there, the different areas. Certainly then we need to prioritize, I'm assuming, right? I mean, do we want to sell when we want to sell? We want the most money when we, how did you go through that process?
Well, for us, in prioritizing, we knew we wanted to exit as quickly as possible, so that was at the top. But we also knew we needed to optimize the business to maximize the value of the sale, and this was going to take time. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit in a little bit here. But we knew that any time frame shorter than 2 years was going to be unrealistic. And then we began analyzing our business and personal finances just to even determine if a sale was possible. If it wasn't, we were going to have to look at probably the absentee owner route if the business plus the personal assets didn't pan out. So once we accomplished these two objectives, then we were able to work on the last two. And when you're quantifying your business and your personal finances, I believe this was probably the most critical. Do you know what your personal net worth is? Do a lot of people know that? And you know what the true value of your business is? I think we all have a number that's probably higher. It's in our head is higher than what it's really worth.
Did you find that to be true for you guys as well, or did you have really no idea?
Well, what we learned in our business evaluation was that, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I'll talk about that here coming up, Dan. But the value of those two numbers dictated when and if we were able to sell the business. And in our case, our CPA had a business appraisal company that he worked with on a regular basis. We met with them to first get a value of the company. That was the first thing we did in this process was let's get a valuation. And the valuation was here's your value today based on the past 3 years of EBITDA and moving forward. And here's your valuation if you can do this, this, and this. And I'll talk about that more in detail. Once we had that done, then we met with a personal financial planner. And they have the software and the tools to sit there and go, okay, here's your personal net worth. Here's the numbers from the business evaluation. Here's what you can expect based on your life expectancy, your current expenses, future expenses, et cetera. So it was a very in-depth couple of meetings with these folks. And then to get back to your question, Dan, we were coming off 2 flat years in 8 and 9, 9 and 10. 11 was a terrible year. 12 was a good year. The majority of business sales are valued on a multiple of EBITDA based on 3 years of past history plus projections looking forward for 3 years. So that told us right away we had to have 2 solid years on top of our 2012 numbers in order to maximize the value of the business. Because if we kept the 9, 10, and 11 numbers on there, our business was worth significantly less than it was when we sold it in 2015. In addition, this allowed us to continue our 2011 initiative of building a strong and committed management team. And one of the key factors that our purchaser made several times through the process was the strength and knowledge of our team. And that created value in his eyes. And my partner and I were still on the board through 2020, so we're still seeing results. But our management team continues to run the company today. And this allowed, by having this team in place, he was essentially able to take the monies that Randy and I were taking out of the business, and he's funding a good portion of that purchase price through the salaries he saved from us, and he lost nothing. So I can't overstate how important it is to have a solid team in place that brings a lot of value to your company. And then also with regards to the value of your business, don't underestimate the taxes and what impact that's going to have on your sale. I'm not a tax expert, and we don't have time to get into tax strategy, but there are a lot of ways to minimize the effect the taxes are going to have on the sale of your business. So please work with your CPA, or preferably a CPA that specializes in the sale of closely held businesses. So once we had all that done, then we had to determine potential buyers. And as we discussed earlier, the two primary ways today are third-party sale or a transfer to insiders. And the most common way is to sell your business to insiders or transfer to family members, key employees, or even through ESOPs. And as we discussed, we looked at all three of those, but it made the most sense to sell to a third party. Our CPA, who I mentioned many times here today, was with us from day one. He was a very trusted advisor. He introduced us to an M&A, an attorney that specialized in mergers and acquisitions. In turn, this attorney worked with M&A firms around the country, and we got a quick introduction to the world of mergers and acquisitions, how the process works, what our option would be, timelines, etc. So after meeting with the attorney, we then set up meetings with different M&A firms, and I didn't realize M&A firms are a lot like any business in terms of they all specialize in certain markets. And he recommended we meet with three firms that specialize in manufacturing and distribution. And after we met with the firms, we ended up selecting a small boutique M&A firm based in the Twin Cities. The process was not at all what I expected. It was surprisingly, I don't say that in a bad way, but it was, I guess I wasn't sure what to expect with how an M&A went through, but the first thing we did with these folks was to analyze the company. He took the business evaluation. We sat down through several meetings. We analyzed, and we came to an agreement on what we felt the business was worth in terms of a range, so that we could then move forward. They then developed a marketing strategy tailored to our needs and designed to maximize the value of the business. It took us about 3.5 to 4 months to put all the data together, to get the memorandum prepared. And this memorandum is a blind memorandum that is then sent out using their database to pre-qualify and screen what they felt were the most motivated potential buyers for our company. And then they managed all the contact with the buyers. They would set the initial meetings and start the negotiations. And then my partner and I would come in on a follow-up meeting and meet with the owners, see if it was a good fit, talk about things that were important to us. One of the things most important to us is that they didn't come in and just release all the employees that had worked so hard to get us to where we were today. Just almost see what the synergies between the two firms would be. And we actually narrowed it down to 3 companies, then to 2, and then finally to 1 that we felt the most comfortable with, before finally closing the deal. So just working with the M&A firm starting in November of 13, it went to market in February of 14, and we had an official signed document. We had a handshake in August. an official signed document in November, and we closed December 31 of 15. And we utilize the M&A firm, our M&A attorney, as well as our CPA to guide us through this whole process until we finally close the deal. So now we've got the deal done. And I mentioned earlier, don't underestimate the impact the taxes will have, because you're looking at probably close to 50% that you're going to donate to Des Moines and Washington, D.C. We found that the majority of business valuations are in that $2 to $10 million range. And the second highest percentage is in the 10 million plus range. So we're talking significant dollars. And if you look at a 1% tax savings on 10 million, I mean, you're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax savings to you that I'm going to guess would you just soon keep in your pocket versus donate it to the government, even though they are such good stewards of our money. One of the things that we worked with to help protect that money is, well, let me back up. We receive money at closing, and then we get annual payments for 5 years. And to protect this, I mentioned we're on the board. And we still meet with the management team bi-weekly for about an hour or two just to get updates on what's happening. So by doing this, we were able to utilize the existing EIN that we had. Now, we hadn't changed the name of the company because the buyer bought the name. So we just kept our EIN, set up a new company name, and our annual payments go to the newly named company. And so we then take that money and we will take an annual paycheck so that we then in turn get Social Security and Medicare credits. But more importantly, we get to deduct business expenses. And we also get to maximize our 401k contributions. So we just take enough of money to maximize the 401k. And in addition, we set up a defined benefit plan. Since there's only 2 employees in the company, almost 50% of the money that we receive each year goes into a defined benefit plan, which is not tax-free, but it is tax-deferred. This is not a one-size-fits-all strategy. This just is a strategy that worked well for us to protect our assets. So again, work closely with your CPA, with tax attorneys to maximize the sale of your business. So I guess for me, I guess we've got about 20 minutes left, but we'll leave some time for questions. To maximize the sale of your business, we found it took time. It took a lot of planning. It took a team of trusted advisors. In our case, it took us 4 years. We started out working with our strategic planning folks and our CPA, both long-term advisors. They introduced us to M&A firms and attorneys, and we were able to navigate the complexity of selling the company at a price that we felt was fair, not only to ourselves, but to the buyer. And that was a key part. We wanted to leave, and we still are in contact with the folks, the buyers. Because when you build a company up over 20 years or 30 years or whatever your case is, you want to see it continue on. And having a good relationship with that, the acquisitioner can help to ensure that your legacy lives on through your company. And I'll put in a shameless plug here for you and I and the Advanced Iowa program. The program they have to help closely held businesses in Iowa. Now, we don't act as the attorneys or the accountants, but we can act as the hub of the wheel to connect these people and help you to navigate this process, because it can be an overwhelming emotional process as you go through it. So with
Okay.
that, I'll turn it over to
Yeah.
questions.
Let's stop there and maybe one thing that you touched on, but we haven't talked about too much here, is kind of that changing identity of a business owner, Mike. So, for 15, 20 years, your identity is wrapped very closely and tightly as owner of NIS, right? And your partner as well. And then when you're getting ready to sell your company, you're losing that identity to some extent, or, for the most part in reality there. How do you, how do you as a business owner go through that? And I realize it's kind of a softer topic and that everyone will be different, but how did you think through that?
Um, Prior to the sale of the business, my brother, who's a stockbroker, recommended a book. It sat on my shelf for a couple of years because I thought it was a typical stockbroker book that he likes to, or stock information stuff he likes to give out. That's all datas and just not stuff you want to read. And one day I found myself in need of something to read, and I picked it up. And the book is The New Retire Mentality, and it's retire and mentality combined into one word. It's written by Mitch Anthony, and it really helped me get a feel for what I wanted to do. It talks about today's retirees, the old days, when Social Security was initially started up. They expected you to live 2 years past retirement. Today we're living 15, 20, 30 years past retirement. And retirees or business owners that have sold don't want to necessarily what Mitch calls jumping off the retirement cliff and just sit in your living room watching Price is Right or whatever it is. You want to still be active. And this book helped me to, okay, what do I want to do for the next 15, 20, 30 years? Hobbies, traveling. Do I want to run another business? I've always been involved in home improvement. So I bought a house to flip. I did that for 7, 8 months until this opportunity with an advisor of Advanced Iowa. Now I use this as my way to give back by helping other business owners. So it's a difficult because the first, especially when we sold, you're coming off the holidays, the slowest time of the year for our business, plus what's there to do in Eastern Iowa in January and February. So it was a kind of a difficult couple of months to transition.
Okay. Have you had we work with lots of folks that have been in your shoes or are in your shoes right now in terms of, going through a sale of a business. Some of them are with us right now. Have you had any seller's remorse?
There was a couple of times that I had seller's remorse, not for very long though. In our biweekly meetings with the management team, I saw how things were running so smoothly. And my partner and I we get together for breakfast once every couple of weeks. And the questions come up, did we sell too early? I mean, the business, we had it all teed up. The business is running on its own. We could have been absentee owners and could have taken this income for the next 10 or 15 years. And then it wasn't much longer after this conversation, we started talking to the folks during a biweekly, and Whirlpool was starting to negotiate a new 3-year contract. And I had forgotten how difficult contract negotiations are with that company. So any buyer's remorse I had was gone after that. I do see a question here from Janet. Is there anything that you wish you would have done differently as you look back? With regards to the sale, no, I don't have anything I'd like to do differently. probably the last 5 or 6 years we were in business, I look at that period, especially moving up to the 2011 timeframe where we had the very difficult years. There's things there I would have done differently so that we wouldn't have been in that situation. But as far as the sale, no, I don't have any regrets or wouldn't change a thing in how we did the sale. Dan, did you have a question?
I was gonna tackle that one I was gonna ask you the one that we just had there. So we took care of that one. So let's see here. We just have a little bit of time left. There's one more question here from Mark Herman. Maybe we can address that one right now. What does Advance Iowa to offer, to help with this process? So in terms of the things that you experienced, how does the services that we offer, you think, align with that?
Well, it's certainly, I like the questionnaire that would have been helpful. The questionnaire that is offered through Advance Iowa, where you go through a lot of the questions that we were asked, but it's in a much more formal way. And then and I'm going to let you talk about this, Dan, because you've had more experience with the BEI survey. I think that could have helped tremendously. Would have made the process a little easier. And I also think the UNI process would have, the Advance Iowa process could have, I don't know if shortening the time period, it certainly would have made it less expensive, because UNI being a state funded, they're not earning the $300 to $400 an hour that the M&A attorneys, and he may have charged more, but I would say on average, the M&A attorneys and the CPAs are charging. So maybe we could have avoided some of the expenses that we saw by trying to go it alone.
Okay. One more question regarding kind of getting your firm ready for sale in that period of time between maybe, I think you said maybe about 2011 to 2016. Sometimes when we're getting ready to sell our house, we fix things up. We install a new dishwasher. We put down new flooring. We paint the walls, and all of a sudden we look at what we've done and we're like, man, maybe we don't really want to sell. The house is all of a sudden pretty nice again, right? Was that something that you guys thought about when you looked at, putting in a bunch of extra effort, and then, like you said, had a kind of a turnkey operation there? Of what was it? Was it hard to walk away from that? Or were you just in your mindset kind of ready for the next step?
We were ready for the next step. We knew we wanted to, part of the reason for developing the management team was we knew we wanted to go either to absentee, or preferably if we couldn't sell it, we'd have to go absentee. So we were ready to go to the next step, because the question was asked, do we just ride this horse until it falls over dead? That was one of the questions we asked ourselves, is, hey, let's go absentee and we'll ride it till the money dries up. So I think that's a question that has to be asked.
I was curious about that, so thanks for sharing a little more there. Anything you would tell owners who are kind of getting ready to go through, or think they might be getting ready to go through what you went through, and things to be prepared for?
Trusted advisors. I'm sure we used to get calls all the time from people saying, hey, I've got somebody interested in your company. I think Dallas must have just a ton of M&A firms, because it seemed like we were always getting phone calls from Dallas. And I actually returned one of them one time just to see if they really did have somebody. Well, they're fishing expeditions. I would never recommend using one of the people that call you over the phone. I would start with whoever your trusted advisor is, your CPA, your attorney, but get to a firm that utilize an M&A firm that specializes in your kind of business. Those would be trusted advisors, and utilizing firms that have been recommended, and do your homework on these firms.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mike. I want to again thank everyone for joining us today. Just a couple of tie-ins quick from what Mike was mentioning with Advance Iowa, what we do with succession planning. Our keys are really about how can we help owners get through this process, and oftentimes we see that they wait for something out of their control to force their hand to where they have to exit. We want to be there with an owner that can do this more proactively instead of reactively. That oftentimes puts more money in your pocket as the owner, usually means a more stable company that you're leaving behind, things like that as well. So we hope to come in contact with an owner well before they're ready to sell, and help walk them through the process, because a lot of it is on the front end about identifying your objectives, deciding the valuation of your firm, and is that what you were hoping it would be worth, and if not, what can we do to help make the company sellable to an outside buyer if that's the route that you're taking. And even if it's not, what can we make that how can we help you make that company more successful, so that you're handing off something to the next generation that isn't going to leave them with a albatross around their neck, so to speak, or key employees. Oftentimes with those insider sales, you as the owner are functioning as a financing source for them, and so you want to protect yourself as much as possible too. So our approach is cognizant of all of those different types of things. So I think I'll probably wrap up there, Mike, unless you have other things that you want to mention. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we'll be putting together a more comprehensive series on ownership transitions for calendar year 2018. We're still kind of getting that finalized, but we've got several speakers lined up for next year as well. So please stay tuned and check back for that. Appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.